This is Something to Gnaw On, and I'm your host, Nate Vinio. This podcast is usually a short parable-style devotional, but this season I'm doing something a little different. I'm reading through a book my dad wrote several years ago called Insights of Pastoral Significance. In this episode, we'll dig into Part 2, the Saul Syndrome. Now, before I dig into this, I want to take a moment and revisit a few comments that were made in the introduction and expand on them, as this part of the book delves into some pretty tough issues for pastors, sometimes referred to as the dark side of ministry. This book was originally written with an audience in mind of pastors, ministry workers, and those training for ministry, Bible college students. And this section was intended to help these individuals understand why some dark behaviors occur in ministry. The intent of this section is to help those affected by such behaviors to both know how to react and to not be intimidated or manipulated. This section does not advocate specifically that one should get out of ministry or endure it. There's no 3 signs to know when to bail out of ministry in situations like this. It provides more of a basic understanding of why these things happen. The decision to stay or go is more an issue of prayer and fasting for those affected by dark side behaviors. At the same time, please keep in mind that the purpose of this book is not to attack the offending minister with the information herein. This is intended more as a tool to help the victim, not as a weapon to attack the offender. With all of that being said, let's dig in. The Saul Syndrome. Symptoms, causes, and remedies. To all appearances, Saul was special, chosen, and publicly endorsed by God to lead a nation, divinely led, humble, not assertive, and having a kingly appearance. His early days as king reflected God's favor. He was a success. Yet, incredibly, the same man developed an above-the-law mentality and a knack for denial and self-justification when challenged by God's prophet. Saul then begins a nosedive into anxiety, paranoia, and depression. Jealousy consumed him as one of his servants, David, began to share in the limelight. Although Saul knew David was a dedicated servant who would lay down his life for him, his jealousy raged, driven by an evil spirit. Scripture records Saul's relentless plots to kill David, to recruit others as assassins, and to even use his daughters, at the expense of their hearts, as unwitting accomplices. In his paranoia, he perceived his own advisers and his son Jonathan as disloyal, even threatening to kill Jonathan. Such was his delusion that he pronounced a blessing in God's name upon the man who revealed David's hiding place. His life ended miserably after consulting a medium. Never was he able to bring himself to say, "I repent." Sadly, men of God with dark sides are not limited to Old Testament times. Paul had his troubles with envious preachers in Rome. See Philippians 1:15-18. Paranoid Diotrephes forbade his congregation to associate with John. See 3 John, verse 9. And even to this day, the ranks of godly shepherds have also contained some who wound the sheep. Like Saul, many enter ministry humbly and sincerely, but something snaps, triggering the dark side lurking within. The purpose of this section is to explore the symptoms, causes, and remedies for the Saul Syndrome, and to explore options for potential codependence. Much like a family with secrets no one wants to talk about, symptoms of this syndrome, i.e., clusters of abnormal behavior, are covered up by those who are aware of the problem, while others, admiring from a distance, remain oblivious. Not only do many not see the dark side of the Christian leader, they do not want to. People need a hero, someone to prop them up for the week, to be a father, someone who has it all together and can offer a sense of security. An accusation against their hero is an attack on their feelings of security. Blinded by what they interpret as his success, i.e., financial or numerical growth, congregates cannot fathom the possibility of a dark side or even a shadow to their pastor. Gladly, they offer unquestioning loyalty. Others remain loyal because they are intimidated by the warped interpretation of Psalm 105:15, "Touch not my anointed ones," believing that any challenge of pastoral misconduct will bring swift vengeance from God, a view that an abusive pastor will promote and exploit. No one wants to incur God's wrath or be labeled troublemaker, unspiritual, rebellious, not on the team, or disloyal. Staff and board members also feel hesitant for similar reasons. For staff, job security and blacklisting are concerns. Consequently, a new caste of untouchables has been created. Symptoms of narcissism abound in the Saul Syndrome. According to Doctors Floyd and Naramore, pathological narcissism is characterized by at least 5 of the following 8 symptoms. 1. A need for constant attention and admiration. Like Saul, narcissists love the admiration of crowds and need to be the focus of attention. While taking credit for everything positive happening in their church, they distance themselves from weak or unsuccessful programs. Much time is spent posturing, demanding unquestioning loyalty, which creates a wall of silence, protecting them from scrutiny and maintaining their perfect image. Status conscious, they actually believe the prosperous image they project enhances the image of the church and therefore the success of the church. Even when they do things that seem motivated by service, they are actually motivated by their desire to look good. They become spin doctors, never admitting failure, but spinning the facts to maintain the illusion of grandeur. They will not accept positions that will not bring them praise. Number 2, a sense of entitlement. Position comes with appropriate perks, say these Sauls who require extravagance as a salve for their fragile self-image. Since entitlements reflect their honored position, they expect and even demand perks which their secular counterparts, or business executives in the business world, that they receive, and are angry when these are not forthcoming. Such entitlements may include exorbitant salaries or investment packages, luxury autos, travel opportunities, and the exclusive right to perform high-profile ceremonies, for example, funerals and weddings of the wealthy, even when families may desire a staff member whom they feel closer. Entitlement outweighs any sense of concern for the financial health of the church or its staff. Narcissistic pastors also feel entitled to blind loyalty and respect without earning either. Number 3, interpersonally exploitive for their own ends. Money and favors are solicited from wealthy, influential members in the guise of friendship. Consequently, it's easy to understand why other church members feel slighted and why the narcissist has few enduring close friends. Staff, whether paid or volunteer, are worked unreasonably to make the pastor look good. When image is everything, no price is too high, especially when others are paying it. Any attempt to rein in out-of-control church finances is a threat to their self-image. Such pastors believe the church and staff revolve around them. Consequently, others never become the people God made them to be. When a staff member is finally used up, he's replaced by someone fresh. Number 4, lack of empathy. Saul's lack of empathy and normal parental concern is chilling. And while empathy is professed by narcissistic leaders, i.e., it's part of their projected image, they are self-engrossed and care little for the needs and feelings of their staff or congregation. For example, visits to the bereaved or dying are made solely to ensure the family will do business with the church. One example, a pastor visiting a wealthy and dying man turned to the wife after the man had taken his last breath and said, "Will you be having the funeral at our church?" This inability to empathize with those they lead enables the narcissist to pursue their own ends without any restraint. They have no hesitancy to use or abuse workers. Any protest or reluctance is met with anger and self-righteous talk of dedication and sacrifice. Such pastors have no concern for the long-term health of the church or its staff. Number 5. Envious of others or believes others are envious of them. They cannot stand to see anyone else getting credit or being in the limelight unless they put them there and can share in the people's admiration. Even successful ministries in their churches are a threat unless they can take credit for them. More common in church ministry is a senior pastor who refuses to allow an associate to preach for fear the congregation might like the associate's preaching better than his own. He takes steps to limit the praise the associate receives, usually by limiting his public exposure. The belief that staff members are envious of them also feeds their paranoia. Number 6. An arrogant, haughty attitude. Uncharacteristic of a servant of Christ, these Sauls exude an air of pride, aloofness, and an overinflated sense of importance. They overestimate their achievements while stubbornly refusing to acknowledge others' accomplishments or abilities because their significance is threatened, as well as the excessive admiration they crave. Narcissists are offended when others do not share their opinions of themselves and often become vengeful. Number 7. A preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success. True narcissists are not interested in truth or reality, or you. They concoct a vision of success that becomes their obsession. These fantasies are often bred by the vain promises of church growth gurus and images presented by megachurches and television ministries. In the meantime, present reality is usually overstated. When contradictory facts and figures are submitted, it makes them angry, and the messenger is denounced as negative. Data is doctored to reflect the illusion. Many churches have been destroyed because they were led into projects that were too costly for the congregation, but were necessary to build the self-image of the pastor. Number 8. A belief that they are special and unique and can only be understood by or associate with other special or high-status people. This is reflected by their buddying up to superiors and big-name leaders while treating their own people like simple commoners. Therefore, they ignore advice and or correction that may come from a staff or a board or a congregation. After all, who do they think they are? This sense of specialness is also reflected in their tendency to live above the rules while rigidly enforcing them on others. Often this leads to unethical, immoral, and illegal behavior. Besides narcissism, another maladaptive personality disorder accompanied Saul. Without question, Saul suffered from a paranoid personality disorder, a chronic pattern of distrust and suspicion of others, such that their motives are interpreted as intending harm. Persons with this disorder are considered hypersensitive, and they constantly read hidden meanings or threats into everyday conversations. They are preoccupied with doubt regarding the loyalty of others and tend to bear grudges for real or imagined wrongs. Hostility lies close to the surface of their hearts, and they overreact to any criticism. Paranoid leaders are pathologically jealous of gifted people. They see their staff and board as their chief enemies, the very ones who are to be their chief partners in caring for people. Paranoid leaders avoid social interactions and have few close relationships with anyone in their church, because that would require some self-disclosure and transparency, which they fear could be used against them. Instead, they prefer to be aloof. An indirect symptom of the Saul Syndrome is codependency among those surrounding the leader, i.e., the staff, the board, or the family. They try to conceal his dark side from the congregation, explaining, spinning, and otherwise doing damage control. A set of unspoken rules develops which governs their public behavior, relationships, and communications, resulting in emotional repression and great stress. Further strain to overworked codependence occurs when they fail to say no to further demands and or feel compelled to compromise their own integrity to hide their superiors' indiscretions. These repressed feelings will eventually burn them out, result in an explosion, or bring physical or emotional breakdown. Perhaps the most frustrating symptoms are the leader's state of denial, their inability to see their condition, and the fact that they seem to be able to claim divine approval by their apparently successful ministry. For example, one successful national evangelist brought many to Christ during the time of his involvement with a prostitute. One of the most insidious aspects of the dark side is that it can maintain its presence in our lives without completely disabling us. Before going on to remedies, the causes of the Saul Syndrome must be identified. These are often the result of existential debt created in childhood that presents continually unmet needs. For example, one component, pathological narcissism, is a personality style that is deeply rooted in the structure of the entire personality from the first few years of life. One of the results is a personality held together by a fragile, skeleton-like self-image that fears abandonment. Could it be that the very inferiority Saul felt as a young man was the same root that later erupted into tormenting fear and outrageous jealousy? A paradox of sorts exists in the lives of most of the leaders who've experienced significant failures. Their personal insecurities, feelings of inferiority, and need for parental approval, among other dysfunctions, that compelled these people to become successful leaders were very often the very same issues that precipitated their failure. The shadow-making process begins early. One television evangelist's obsession with image goes back to the embarrassment he felt as a child over his family's poverty and the ridicule he was exposed to. He vowed to never let it happen again as an adult, but to soothe his wounded self-image with luxurious living. Poor parenting skills figure largely as a cause of the syndrome. If parents do not serve their growth-promoting functions, for example, by being preoccupied or hostile or intrusive, a number of narcissistic personality disorders may develop. Such a person will do anything to create excitement and ward off feelings of deadness. Famished for admiration and attention, they begin a life quest to gain the approval of their parents. Also responsible are the parents who deny the emotional needs of their children by imposing age-inappropriate adult roles on their children, demanding unreasonable results. On the other hand, parents who spoil their children create unrealistic expectations they carry into adulthood and the ministry. They believe, I deserve special treatment. I expect to get my way. When lessons from childhood aren't learned, it drives even successful leaders to make unwise, impulsive, unethical, or immoral choices. The potential narcissist fails to develop his true God-given self and shifts his energies into becoming the kind of person he thinks he must be in order to feel good about himself, someone that everyone would admire. He can only feel good about himself when his false, grandiose, perfect self is being affirmed. Children who never learn to self-soothe become adult narcissists who can't accept their limitations or the fact that their wishes will not always be met. Children who grow up in wealthy or influential homes but whose parents are not sufficiently emotionally nourishing can sometimes develop a strong sense of entitlement and lack of sensitivity to others. In some homes, parents were the focus and children were expected to serve their needs, implanting in them an unbiblical concept that leaders exist to be served. Also, parental neglect or indifference causes children to develop a compensatory false self that desires greatness and affirmation. They are driven by what Werner calls, quote, the cognitive triad of worthlessness. I am no good, helpless. There is nothing I can do about myself, and hopelessness. I will always be this way. End quote. The modern church environment may also trigger the pastor's dark side. Wild expectations of numerical and financial growth are fostered in seminars, progressive seminaries, and some megachurches and televangelists. One church growth guru boasted, These principles will work in any type of church anywhere in the world, and if all the characteristics are present in these principles of marketing, they'll work every time. I.e., if a church does not grow, it is because the pastor or the staff has failed to follow the rule. Cloaked in churchy language, this human ambition suits the narcissist well. He will drive himself and others towards the goal. When success is not forthcoming, narcissists push harder, blame, explode, fire the staff, or leave. And ladies and gentlemen, this is where we are going to put the proverbial virtual fork or bookmark in the episode here, and we will come back for the next episode to wrap up the Saul Syndrome. I would also recommend, too, that if you're interested in looking into this any deeper, my dad's book is on Amazon. You can look it up by name, Insights of Pastoral Significance. You will also find in there that I don't have it listed. I don't have all the bibliography listed, but there's quite a bit of research that went into this as well. And it's not just somebody shooting from the hip. There is a lot of research that has gone into this, and if you'd like to follow up on that, if that is your gig or concern or what have you, definitely get the book and dig into that as well. Next episode, we're going to dive into the remedies of the Saul Syndrome, and there will be definitely plenty for you to know on in that, and I know there is plenty for you to chew on from this episode. But until next week or next episode, whichever that may be for you, God bless.